Aide-mémoire.
Date: May 19, 2025 from Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF. 2. Diplomatic missions and international partners. No amount of lies or fabrications could conceal the truth. A response to the document setting the record straight. A note addressing the issues raised in the 8 May Meyer, circulated by the federal government. This response is issued in reference to the Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs circulated note entitled Setting the Record Straight. A note addressing the issues raised in the 8 May Meyer. Its purpose is to address and correct the misrepresentations and factual inaccuracies contained therein, while reaffirming the TPLF's unwavering commitment to peace, constitutional order, and the full implementation of the COHA. Although the note attempts to deflect responsibility and shift blame through carefully constructed narratives, the underlying truth remains evident and cannot be obscured. 1. On the so-called war faction. Regarding the unfounded claims of a so-called war faction, the TPLF has consistently reaffirmed its unwavering commitment to the full implementation of the COHA and its sincere desire to promote peaceful relations with all neighboring countries. Neither the organization nor the people of Tigray have any interest in further bloodshed. The federal government's portrayal of the TPLF as a warmongering entity is both baseless and misleading. Despite persistent provocations, unwarranted delays, and inflammatory rhetoric including biased documentaries and hostile public statements, the TPLF has remained steadfast in fulfilling its obligations and honoring its commitments. There are no internal factions within the TPLF. The defections of a few individuals to the side of those responsible for the immense suffering inflicted upon the people of Tigray do not represent the actual organization's stance or unity. By labeling the TPLF as a war faction, the federal government is attempting to justify to the diplomatic community its continued refusal to reinstate the party's legal status. This stance directly undermines the spirit and obligations of the Pretoria Agreement, COHA, under which the TPLF's legal personality should have been automatically restored following the House of People's Representatives' revocation of its terrorist designation. Such political maneuvering not only defies established legal procedures but also casts doubt on the federal government's commitment to a genuine and inclusive peace process. 2. On fuel shortages and blockade. The federal government continues to undermine the COHA through a series of obstructive actions, chiefly among them the near-total blockade on fuel deliveries to the Tigray region. This has effectively been an embargo that has had a devastating impact on both social and economic life, openly imposed and plainly visible in its consequences. 1. In an effort to rationalize this restriction, the federal government alleges that fuel is being hoarded or diverted for illicit purposes. However, such claims do not withstand scrutiny. When fuel shipments have not reached Mekelle from the port of Djibouti, accusations of profiteering or misuse by the TPLF are not only implausible but deliberately misleading. These narratives function as a smokescreen for what is, in effect, the continuation of a siege, one that deepens the humanitarian crisis and further destabilizes the region. These actions constitute an economic blockade and amount to collective punishment of civilians. Compounding this, the recently imposed travel restrictions on foreign nationals and members of the diaspora seeking to enter Tigray, as detailed below, represent a troubling escalation. Such measures deepen the region's isolation and severely undermine transparency, hinder humanitarian coordination, and obstruct toward peaceful reintegration. 3. On constitutionally recognized territories, the federal government appears to be engaging in semantic manipulation of key provisions within the COHA. Such tactics do not advance peace and stability neither within Ethiopia nor in the region. The TPLF firmly upholds that respect for pre-war territorial status is a foundational principle of the agreement. In instances where disputes or competing claims arise, the federal constitution offers clear and legitimate mechanisms for resolution. Any effort to circumvent these constitutional processes undermines the rule of law and threatens the prospects of a durable and just peace. 4. On internally displaced persons, IDPs. The claim that the TPLF is obstructing the return of internally displaced persons, IDPs, is unfounded. The ongoing displacement crisis is primarily due to the continued insecurity in areas under occupation and the federal government's failure to take necessary action. As a result, thousands of people remain without adequate shelter, food, or protection, conditions that deteriorate further with each passing rainy season. 5. On political dialogue, it is disingenuous to downgrade the expected substantive dialogue to occasional meetings and top-down lectures by the federal authorities. It is an open fact that the thin linkage between Tigray and the federal government is the Koha. Tigray is not part of any relevant institution. Substantive talks should be held from the root cause of the war to future involvement of Tigray as part of the federation. An attempt to belittle the dialogue and its future outcome that determine the status of Tigray as part and active member of the federation is short-sighted and disservice to the Ethiopian people. 6. On alleged relations with Eritrea, the TPLF has consistently championed peaceful and constructive relations with all neighboring regions and countries. It firmly maintains that any disputes or misunderstanding must be resolved through dialogue, mutual respect, and adherence to established norms. Recent allegations circulated by the federal government claiming secret meetings and military coordination with Eritrea are entirely baseless and unsupported by any credible evidence. These accusations appear to be part of a politically motivated disinformation campaign, aimed at distorting the truth and misleading both domestic and international audiences. The TPLF unequivocally rejects these false claims and reaffirms its steadfast commitment to peace. It remains fully open to genuine dialogue and cooperative engagement focused on fostering mutual understanding and securing lasting stability in the region. 7. On the TPLF's continued commitment to peace despite persistent delays and provocations, the TPLF has remained steadfast in its commitment to peace, constitutional order, and justice. Its restraint has helped prevent further escalation and reflects a genuine willingness to engage constructively with all stakeholders toward a peaceful and stable future. Regrettably, the federal government has taken a contrary path. As detailed in the new developments below, it is not the TPLF but the federal government that is actively undermining peace by creating, arming and supporting proxy groups with the explicit aim of dismantling the TPLF through force. These actions directly violate the spirit and letter of the Koha and raise serious concerns about the federal government's intentions. 8. New developments. TIRA reconstituted and operational following the appointment of Lieutenant General Tadesse Warid as President of the Interim Regional Administration of Tigray, TIRA. He has successfully formed his cabinet and developed a comprehensive 100-day action plan. After thorough consultations with cabinet members and key stakeholders, the plan was formally endorsed by the cabinet. The plan prioritizes the safe and dignified return of internally displaced persons, IDPs, the restoration of Tigray's constitutionally recognized territories, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, DDR, post-war recovery and reconstruction, improved governance of land and mineral resources, and the effective delivery of basic services. The TPLF has reaffirmed its full support for President Tadesse and his administration in the implementation of these critical initiatives. B. NEB's revocation of the TPLF's legal status. The TPLF was officially deregistered by the National Election Board of Ethiopia, NEB, on January 18, 2021. Since then, the TPLF has consistently and unequivocally called for the restoration of its pre-war legal and political status, a demand grounded in the mutual recognition of both parties as signatories of the Pretoria Agreement, KOHA. Attempts to reclassify or re-register the TPLF as a new party are entirely unacceptable and run counter to the letter and spirit of the KOHA. The TPLF firmly rejects such efforts and strongly warns the federal government against using as a pretext to erode the peace agreement. 3. Restoring the TPLF's legal status is not a matter of political fairness but also a critical step toward deepening peace, enhancing mutual trust, and ensuring lasting stability in Ethiopia and the broader region. It is the only viable path forward. See federal sponsorship of armed groupings and hostile propaganda against Tigray despite public claims of supporting peace and the implementation of the Pretoria Agreement, KOHA. Recent developments on the ground suggest otherwise. It is now widely acknowledged and deeply alarming that the federal government is actively involved in sponsoring the formation of a new armed group with the explicit aim of forcibly dismantling the TPLF and the interim administration, destabilizing Tigray. This group, reportedly based in Samara, Afar region, is receiving logistical support, leadership direction, and coordination from federal authorities. Its objective is not peace, reconciliation, or constitutional engagement, but the violent elimination of a legitimate political actor and a recognized signatory to the COHA. Such actions stand in direct contradiction to the federal government's professed commitment to peace. Rather than advancing the peace process, it is deliberately undermining it and creating conditions that risk reigniting conflict. We call for an immediate termination of such sponsorship of armed groupings as it clearly breaches Article 3.2 of COHA, which bans all direct or indirect acts of violence and subversion or use of proxies to destabilize the other party. Moreover, hostile rhetoric, unfounded accusations, and inflammatory narratives continue unabated from senior officials, including the former president of TIRA, now serving as Ethiopia's Minister for Eastern Africa. These orchestrated campaigns are designed to delegitimize Tigrayan institutions and leadership, sow division within Tigray, and provoke instability and potential violence across the broader region. Such actions constitute a direct violation of Article 3.3 of the Pretoria Agreement, which explicitly mandates the cessation of all forms of hostile propaganda, rhetoric, and hate speech. The TPLF strongly condemns smear campaigns and calls for their immediate cessation. If left unchecked, these actions threaten to unravel the fragile progress toward peace and further entrenched societal polarization, de-escalating isolation, renewed travel bans and silent blockade of Tigray alongside the ongoing fuel restrictions. An even more alarming development is unfolding: a renewed and systematic campaign by the federal government to isolate Tigray from the outside world. Foreign nationals, including diplomats, humanitarian workers, investors, and even tourists, are being prohibited from entering Tigray. Ethiopian diaspora members holding foreign passports are reportedly being blocked at Addis Ababa Bole International Airport from traveling to the region. Notably, no such restrictions apply to other regions in Ethiopia. These measures, implemented without any formal announcement, legal basis, or public justification, amount to a de facto blockade. They mirror the very tactics of isolation and for obstruction employed both in the lead-up to the war and at its height. When combined with the fuel ban, this constitutes a deliberate policy of containment, suppression, and deprivation, undermining transparency, strangling humanitarian access, and cutting off the region from economic and diplomatic engagement. These actions flagrantly violate COHA, as well as both Ethiopian constitutional rights and international legal norms, including the right to freedom of movement, access to humanitarian assistance, and the principles of open and accountable governance, safe and immediate return of IDPs and restoration of Tigray's constitutionally recognized territories, the safe return of internally displaced persons, IDPs, and the restoration of Tigray's constitutionally recognized territories are core pillars of the Pretoria Agreement. Both the TPLF and the newly reconstituted Tigray Interim Regional Administration, TIRA, have made these issues their highest priorities for the coming 3 months. However, despite repeated calls for action, the Ethiopian government has shown persistent reluctance to implement these critical provisions. As a result, close to 1 million IDPs continue to endure immense suffering, with no access to their homes, land, or livelihoods. The situation grows more dire as the rainy season approaches, threatening to condemn hundreds of thousands to a 5th consecutive winter in displacement. This inaction is not only inhumane, it is a blatant violation of the peace agreement and the fundamental rights of the displaced population. It is equally evident that thousands of internally displaced persons from Arab community and northern Tigray warriors continue to suffer under similar dire conditions. The federal government must fulfill its constitutional responsibilities by demanding the immediate withdrawal of foreign forces from Ethiopian territory. Furthermore, It must ensure the safe and dignified return of displaced populations following the withdrawal of the occupying Eritrean forces. Equally central to the COHA is the restoration of Tigray's territorial integrity. Yet, instead of adhering to constitutional mechanisms to resolve the issue, the Ethiopian government is reportedly training and arming militias in western Tigray zone. The intentions are evident to any close observer of the area, as the militias refer to themselves as the Techies Guards. These provocative actions violate the COHA, obstruct the safe and dignified return of IDPs, and dangerously risk reigniting armed conflict. We therefore call for the immediate demilitarization of the Western Tigray zone and the withdrawal of all unauthorized armed groups. A just, lawful, and timely resolution to the territorial issue must be prioritized to preserve the peace process and prevent further destabilization. 5.9. A renewed call to action. The recent formation of a new Tigray administration cabinet marks a potential turning point and opportunity to reinvigorate the peace process through constructive engagement. However, the serious developments outlined above must be urgently addressed to prevent further deterioration and uphold the integrity of the Pretoria Agreement. COHA. We therefore call on all partners to reaffirm the binding nature and full implementation of the COHA, support the immediate convening of the long overdue panel of leaders review meeting, immediately initiate a political dialogue to facilitate the restoration of the TPLF's legal and political status in line with the peace agreement, ensure the safe and dignified return of all IDPs, restore Tigray's constitutionally recognized territories without delay, facilitate meaningful and inclusive political dialogue among the signatory parties, unequivocally condemn and take urgent action against the federal government's support for armed groupings against Tigray, demand the immediate lifting of unlawful travel restrictions, ensure unimpeded access to and from Tigray for diplomats, tourists, international business community, humanitarian actors, and members of the diaspora, guarantee the full and consistent resumption of fuel supplies to Tigray, support President Tedesz and his interim administration in undertaking recovery and reconstruction programs. 10. Conclusion. The circulated note cannot obscure the mounting pattern of federal obstruction, misinformation, bad faith actions. The people of Tigray are not pursuing conflict, they are demanding recognition, justice, and a durable peace grounded in constitutional order and mutual respect. The TPLF reaffirms its unwavering commitment to genuine dialogue, constitutional principles, and a peaceful, democratic future for all Ethiopians. It stands ready to work with any and all actors who are sincerely committed to upholding the COHA and advancing a just and inclusive path forward. The time for selective narratives and manufactured crises must end. What is now required is truth, accountability, and action. 6.